These answer choices make it very easy to predict the question here. We can see that obviously punctuation is going to matter. It's the only thing that's different in the different choices. But we really should memorize this simple rule that punctuation is really about sentence structure, right? We learn when we're young that commas and dashes and periods, they all represent pauses. When we talk, we pause. And that's kind of true. However, it's not very helpful because people pause in different places. You can kind of hear me talking. I'm pausing just to think of my next word. So it's hard to know where those pauses are when we write. And so the better way to think about punctuation is that it is a shift in the sentence structure. Sometimes it's an interruption. Sometimes we're adding something onto a sentence. So that's what a comma does. It marks a place where something is shifting. So if you go into the main sentence here with that in mind, you can start to look for where does my idea begin and end. So this is what I see. This is how I would go through this. Boss Tweed's Tammany Hall Group, so that sounds like the start of a thought, which controlled New York City in the 1860s. That which tells me I've got an extra clause. But now I get back to the main sentence. Stole more than $30 million. Right? So that yellow is the sentence. The pink could just be lifted out of it. Boss Tweed's Tammany Hall Group stole more than $30 million. That's a sentence. That's a thought. What's the next piece doing? The equivalent of more than $365 million today. That's also an extra thing. So the yellow is the sentence. These parts are, we can call them clauses, fragments, interruptions, whatever we want. There's lots of words for these. I don't want to get too specific into the grammar. The point is they're non-essential. They could be removed from the sentence and we would still have a sentence. Boss Tweed's Tammany Hall Group stole more than $30 million. Now, when we move between main pieces of the sentence and extra clauses, non-essential, unnecessary clauses, we use commas to show the shift. That's what a comma really is doing. And yes, we often pause as we're making that shift, but not always, and so this is much more reliable. And so that's why this comma here after 30 million belongs there, right? It's letting us attach the green to the yellow. We also have a comma before the pink that lets us attach the pink to the yellow, or more accurately, lets us interrupt the yellow with the pink. So that's totally fine. And the thing though is when we come back to the yellow, we need to show the shift in punctuation again. And so we need a comma to do that. So that means that choice D is wrong. And A is wrong because we could use a dash, but we would need symmetry. So the only way that this would be a dash at the end is if this was a dash here, then we could use two dashes to do that separation. But the choice has already been made for us that we've gone with a comma as a way to block this piece, this pink piece, out of the main sentence. So we got to be consistent and continue with the comma. Then we have another last minute choice here. Do we need this comma after city? And this is where, we do need to memorize some comma rules here. In the 1860s, is a prepositional phrase. So let me underline that and throw that on the board here. Prepositional phrase. And a prepositional phrase is a little extra clause that we throw into a sentence to give us some more information. So extra clause, you'd think, well, I need a comma. But prepositional phrases are a bit of an exception. They do not need a comma. We just attach them. The preposition is small enough that it lets us do that, I guess. I don't know. But yes, in this case, we are not going to use a comma there, so B is going to be the answer because we're allowed to take that little extra piece and attach it without the comma. Why? Well, someone decided, hundreds of years ago, and here we are today. So a lot of these rules are not really logical or consistent from one rule to the other, but each individual rule is fairly consistent. It is typical that prepositional phrases will not have commas. There are exceptions, And the reason there's an exception usually is that something else is shifting that causes that to happen. So you always, and that's why it's better to memorize rules about how a sentence is formed, the structure of the sentence, and not, words like which always get a comma or prepositions never get a comma. The SAT is good at finding these little places where, there might be an exception. So associate punctuation with sentence structure, and you are more likely to not get all tripped up when the SAT throws an exception at you.